Before this gets buried in the dark corners of the internet, hit subscribe, tap like, and leave a comment, because what you're about to hear is the kind of story prisons don't want remembered. The man who ruled from a concrete box. The alarm screamed to the cell block at 2:17 a.m., sharp and relentless, slicing to the stale air of Ironwood Federal Penitentiary. Guards ran toward cell D-13, boots pounding concrete, radios crackling with overlapping panic. Inside the cell, an inmate lay motionless on the floor, his body twisted at an unnatural angle. There were no obvious wounds, no blood splattered across the walls. Just a face frozen in terror, eyes wide open, staring at something no one else could see. This was the third unexplained death in Ironwood in 6 weeks. And every single time, the trail led back to the same man. Marcus Redline Kessler had been locked behind reinforced steel for 11 years. Officially, he was serving 3 life sentences for orchestrating a multi-state crime network that left dozens dead. Unofficially, inmates whispered a different truth. Redline never stopped running his empire. Prison didn't cage him. It centralized him. Detective Aaron Cole stood just outside the cell, staring at the body on the floor. He had worked homicide for 20 years and learned early to trust patterns more than people. 3 deaths. No signs of forced entry. No physical trauma. All 3 victims had one thing in common. They had crossed Marcus Kessler inside Ironwood. Cole's partner, Lieutenant Maya Hernandez, lower her voice. Medical says heart failure. Again. Cole didn't respond. Healthy men in their 30s didn't just drop dead after being seen arguing with the same inmate days earlier. Not 3 times in a row. Marcus Kessler sat on his bunk when they reached his cell, hands folded calmly, eyes sharp and alert. He smiled when he saw them, the kind of smile that never reached the eyes. "Detective," he said softly, "back so soon." Kessler had a reputation that stretched far beyond Ironwood. Before his arrest, he was known for turning rivals against each other, for making people disappear without ever being in the room. Prosecutors called him a strategist. Survivors called him a ghost. Cole leaned closer to the bars. 3 men are dead, Kessler. "That's unfortunate," Marcus replied. "Prison can be stressful. What made Kessler dangerous wasn't violence. It was influence. He controlled access to contraband, protection, favors, and information. If someone needed something inside Ironwood, Marcus decided whether they got it or paid for asking. The first victim, Jonah Pike, had been overheard threatening to expose an internal smuggling route. The second, Luis Moreno, was rumored to have stolen commissary credits tied to Kessler's network. The third had been a new arrival, loud, reckless, and arrogant enough to brag about testifying in an unrelated case. None of them lived long enough to speak again. As the investigation widened, Cole and Hernandez uncovered a disturbing pattern. Each victim had received a visit from the prison chaplain within 24 hours of their death. The chaplain, Father William Crow, had been serving Ironwood for nearly 2 decades and was known for his open-door policy. Cole requested the visitation logs. What he saw made his stomach tighten. Every chaplain visit lined up perfectly with Marcus Kessler's known movements. Moments when his cell block was under lockdown, when no inmate-to-inmate contact was supposed to be possible. And yet, messages were moving. Orders were being carried out. How? Hernandez asked quietly. He's locked down 23 hours a day. Cole tapped the folder. Because Ironwood isn't built on walls. It's built on people. They began digging into staff records, searching for leaks. That's when another inmate died, this time in the laundry room, collapsing mid-shift. Again, no marks. Again, ruled natural causes. But this one had a note hidden in his shoe. 3 words, written shakily in pencil. He told me. The administration wanted the case closed. For deaths labeled medical anomalies were easier to explain than admitting a maximum security prison was being controlled from the inside out. Cole and Hernandez were warned to back off. Budget concerns. Jurisdictional limits. No direct evidence. Then the call came from an informant. A guard, young, nervous, and clearly terrified, agreed to meet off the record. He claimed Marcus Kessler wasn't just giving orders. He was testing loyalty. forcing inmates to prove themselves by carrying out tasks that left no visible trace. Psychological pressure. Coercion, a system designed to kill without leaving fingerprints. Before the guard could sign a statement, he disappeared. His car was found abandoned near the prison's East Service Road, key still in the ignition, phone crushed beneath the tire. When Cole returned to Ironwood that night, Marcus Kessler was waiting, standing at the bars as if he had been expecting him. "You should stop digging, detective," Kessler said calmly. "People get hurt when you ask the wrong questions." Cole stared back, anger burning behind his eyes. "You're already serving life." Marcus smiled again, slower this time. Life is a long time to control outcomes. Hours later, investigators finally received authorization to search a long-sealed storage level beneath Ironwood, an area decommissioned after a fire decades earlier. The door was rusted shut, keys long lost. When they forced it open, flashlights cutting through dust and darkness, they found a hidden room. Inside were files, ledgers, names of inmates, guards, and outside contacts. And at the center of it all, written in red ink, was one sentence that changed the investigation forever. "This is only inmate number 1. The system that learned to kill." For Hairdson, and for everyone now pulled into gravity of this case, the truth was becoming impossible to ignore. Ironwood wasn't just failing to contain violence. It was manufacturing it. The hidden room beneath the prison changed everything. The ledgers cataloged favors, punishments, and outcomes with chilling precision. Names were circled in black, crossed out in blue, or underlined in red. Red meant removed, not transferred, not disciplined. Removed. Detective Aaron Cole flipped through page after page as forensic teams photographed every inch of the room. The handwriting was unmistakable. Marcus Kessler's meticulous, controlled script appeared throughout the documents, but he wasn't the only author. There were other hands involved, guards, inmates, and at least one civilian contractor. "This isn't one killer," Lieutenant Maya Hernandez said quietly. "It's a machine." The ledgers detail 5 inmates marked as assets, each assigned influence over different wings of the prison. They weren't enforcers in the traditional sense. They were manipulators, recruiters, and silencers. Each one had a body count tied not to direct violence, but to pressure, isolation, and engineered fear. Inmate number 2 was Elias Grant, a former financial analyst convicted of large-scale fraud. Inside Ironwood, he ran the prison economy. Commissary credits, gambling debts, protection fees. Grant controlled the flow. Inmates who crossed him suddenly found themselves starving, exposed, and desperate. Grant had been found hanging in his cell 2 years earlier, officially ruled a suicide. Cole stared at the ledger entry beside Grant's name. End of usefulness. Replace. Inmate number 3 was Victor Hale, a soft-spoken man with a history of violent assaults. He served as the system's intimidator, spreading rumors so precise they destroyed reputations overnight. Men accused of being informants were targeted without proof, beaten not by Hale, but by others convinced they were acting on truth. Hale had been transferred suddenly to another facility 6 months earlier. No forwarding address was listed. The deeper Cole and Hernandez dug, the clearer the pattern became. Marcus Kessler didn't need to kill. He created environments where death became inevitable, where the prison itself applied the pressure. Then came the first retaliation. Lieutenant Hernandez's apartment was broken into while she slept. Nothing was stolen, no damage. Just one item left on her kitchen table, a folded piece of paper bearing the Ironwood inmate number system. Her number. Administration still refused to shut down the prison or isolate Kessler completely. Instead, they reassigned guards, limited press access, and quietly pressured Cole's superiors to remove him from the case. When that failed, the intimidation escalated. An evidence locker fire destroyed several physical copies of the ledgers. Surveillance footage from key hallways vanished. Witnesses recanted statements, claiming confusion or misunderstanding. One inmate didn't recant. Daniel Price was serving 12 years for armed robbery and had been listed in the ledger as unstable potential exposure. He requested protective custody after seeing the documents on the news. Before the transfer could happen, Price was found unconscious in the shower room. He survived. Barely able to speak, Price told investigators that Marcus Kessler never gave direct orders. Instead, he planted ideas, fears, and incentives. Inmates acted because they believed not acting would be worse. "He makes you feel like the walls are listening," Price whispered. "Like he already knows what you're thinking." As Price was wheeled out of Ironwood under heavy guard, Cole received a message through the prison's internal system. No sender listed. For assets gone. One remains. The final name in the ledger was circled 3 times. Inmate number 5, Samuel Rourke. Unlike the others, Rourke had no reputation, no known influence, no disciplinary history. He was serving a quiet 20-year sentence for manslaughter and had kept his head down since arriving at Ironwood. That's what made him perfect. Rourke worked in maintenance. He had access everywhere: cells, tunnels, storage, medical. He fixed doors, replaced lights, and moved unseen to the prison's blind spots. According to the ledger, Rourke was being groomed for something larger. Before Cole could request Rourke's immediate isolation, Ironwood went into lockdown. A guard was found dead in the infirmary. This time, there was no mistaking it. The man had been poisoned. The substance slipped into his coffee during a routine shift. Toxicology flagged a compound that shouldn't have existed inside the prison. Cole knew what it meant. Marcus Kessler's system wasn't collapsing. It was evolving. As emergency lights bathed Ironwood in red, Cole stood outside Kessler's cell once more. Marcus sat calmly, reading a paperback novel, as if the prison weren't unraveling around him. "You can't stop it," Kessler said without looking up. "Even if you lock me in concrete and steel, the idea survives." Cole leaned in, voice low and steady. "You built this to outlive you." Marcus finally looked up, eyes cold. "No, detective. I built it so I'd never need to leave." Hours later, as authorities prepared to extract Samuel Rourke from the general population, they discovered his cell empty. His bed was neatly made, and written on the wall, etched deep into concrete, were 6 words that signaled the next phase of the nightmare. "The prison is only the beginning. The men who never left." By the time dawn broke over Ironwood, the prison was no longer a facility. It was a crime scene suspended in time. For Harrison, and for investigators across federal agencies, the disappearance of Samuel Rourke triggered an emergency response that went far beyond prison walls. Roadblocks were set up within a 50-mile radius. Maintenance tunnels were drained and searched. Every staff member was detained and interviewed. Still, Rourke was nowhere. Detective Aaron Cole stood in the command room, staring at a blown-up photo of the message carved into Rourke's cell wall. "The prison is only the beginning." It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of continuity. Marcus Kessler had designed 5 deadly inmates to function as a living system. 3 were dead, 1 vanished, and 1, Marcus himself, remained perfectly still at the center. Then the first body appeared outside Ironwood. A parole officer was found slumped in his car on a quiet suburban street. No signs of struggle, no visible injury. Toxicology confirmed the same compound used to kill the infirmary guard. Inside the officer's jacket pocket was a folded maintenance receipt stamped with an Ironwood inventory code. Samuel Rourke's code. The revelation sent shockwaves through the case. Rourke hadn't escaped blindly. He had been placed, activated. His access inside the prison had mirrored access points outside: government buildings, transport hubs, halfway houses, places no one watched closely enough. Cole finally got authorization for what he'd been demanding all along: total isolation of Marcus Kessler. But when guards arrived at cell D13, they found it empty. No broken bars, no forced entry, just a neatly folded uniform on the bunk and a paperback novel left open on the bed. Surveillance showed Kessler walking calmly down a maintenance corridor hours earlier, escorted by a guard who later claimed he had no memory of the interaction. The system hadn't just learned to kill, it had learned to erase. A nationwide manhunt followed, but the truth emerged too slowly to stop what came next. Over the following weeks, 3 more deaths surfaced across different states. A corrections consultant, a private contractor, a former inmate advocate. Each had crossed paths with Ironwood. Each died without obvious violence. Each case bore the same invisible signature. Investigators eventually uncovered the final layer of Kessler's design. The 5 inmates weren't meant to survive together. They were phases. Each one trained replacements, embedded habits, and normalized obedience. When one fell, another took the role without needing instruction. Kessler didn't build a gang. He built a culture. Marcus Kessler was finally captured 6 months later in a rural town hundreds of miles from Ironwood. He didn't resist arrest. He didn't deny anything. During interrogation, he spoke calmly, almost kindly, explaining his philosophy as if discussing architecture. Prisons think control comes from bars, he said, but control comes from belief. Once people believe obedience keeps them alive, they'll do anything. Kessler was sentenced again, another life term, this time under the strictest isolation protocols ever approved. No visitors, no mail, no contact. The system, authorities claimed, was dismantled. Samuel Rourke was never found. Ironwood was officially decommissioned the following year. The buildings were sealed, the staff reassigned, the records archived. The public was told the threat had ended, but Detective Cole knew better. 3 months after Kessler's transfer, a man collapsed in a county jail hundreds of miles away. Healthy, no injuries. Sudden cardiac failure. Investigators almost closed the case until they found something etched beneath the metal bed frame. 5 lines, 1 circled, and beneath them, a familiar sentence. The prison is only the beginning. Cole never returned to corrections work after that. He kept a single copy of the Ironwood ledger locked away, unread but never forgotten, because the most disturbing truth wasn't that 5 deadly inmates had shaken the U.S. prison system. It was that the system had learned from them. They thought the architect was behind bars, but the design was still standing. And somewhere, someone was already learning the rules. If this story stayed with you longer than it should have, you already know this wasn't the last chapter.